Welcome to Side Alpha Leadership, a podcast where leaders can share their experiences and discuss what leadership means to them. I'm your host, David Polikoff. Hello and welcome to this month's episode of Side Alpha Leadership. I'm your host, David Polikoff. On the phone, I have with me Shelly Wheeler. I've known Shelly for a number of years. We used to work together. She was on the show about 2 years ago, and so a lot's happened since the last time we talked. So without me going any further, Shelly, welcome back to the show and tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you've done and what you're doing now.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me back. So currently, I'm a captain with Montgomery County Fire Rescue. My current assignment is at the training academy. I have about 25 to 30 different roles at any one time, but basically I'm the in-service training coordinator, which means I'm basically tasked with all the training for Montgomery County Fire Rescue, more like company level training, training that, the department deems necessary to make sure that, we're ready to go as far as doing our daily job and addressing any issues that we may see coming up within our department or the fire service as a whole. And there's a lot of other hats that go along with that. We're kind of run the academy on bare bones. But it's been a great role. I've been there for about 2 years now, and it's taken me about 2 years to finally kind of get my feet somewhat firmly planted on the ground. Currently, we just set up an acquired structure training program that allows us to do a lot of company level training, which I call company level training on steroids, because as an academy, we go in and we facilitate that training through scenario-based realistic training. And the change that we've kind of made, and it's been interesting to watch morph. We just create a scenario for the units to come in, and we don't drive the scenario. The decision-making process of the officer and their units drive the outcome of the scenario. And then we talk about it, and then the onus is on the officer and their crew to go back and address any issues they feel need improved. And it's been widely popular. We basically run it like a real call, which, a lot of the information came from all around the country, talking to different people that have acquired training programs. So that's the biggest thing we've been working on that we're really excited. It was about 2 years in the making. Really, really good positive response from people. So I've been engaged in that a lot from the Montgomery County side of things. Been trying to get a flashover simulator program set up, and just to offer more people and more for the field, and an in-service platform that isn't just once a year, but we're looking at it as an ongoing 365 type program. So that's what I'm doing at the academy in a nutshell. And then some of my other things that I've got going on. Last time we talked, I was working on my dissertation on effective fire service leadership. Since the last time we talked, I've completed that, graduated. I'm a full-fledged doctor now. Still don't throw that term around a lot. It's still kind of weird, but so I've accomplished that. And from accomplishing that, my degree is in business administration with a specialty in organizational leadership. So starting up a few things, working on starting up a consulting company. Myself and two other ladies that I know very well, we started up a nonprofit. It's called Survival to Thrival. And the whole premise of it is to, there's a lot of help out there for a lot of underprivileged people, which is great. But there's we identified this big portion of people that maybe just below middle class, trying to get to that next level, that they make a little too much to get help, but not enough to really let them climb to that next level. So we're looking to focus on giving money to maybe small startup businesses, those single parent that maybe They may be able to afford to go get a certificate that they need to get to the next level of their job, but they may not have the money for daycare, just to satisfy that need. So basically empower people to, pick themselves up, get them to the next level. And then the whole idea is then we pay it back forward and we help society get better by, helping one person at a time. So that's kind of been our premise. We looked into a lot of it. There seems to be a big need for that. So we're excited about getting that up and running. And then we're running I'm partnered with another friend of mine. We're currently working on a book on risk management. So we're writing a book and setting up our own consulting company specific to risk management. Because the interesting thing is you can look at operational risk management and it's very accepted in the business world and the finance world. And then we kind of fall flat on our face in jobs like ours. The police department, military does it. Military does it well and does it based off of HFACS, which is a long-term study on human factor analysis and, why things go wrong. And it's, normally because of the human element. And so we're excited to build that out. My partner and I, Tim Woody, are very passionate about it. And then I had mentioned last time I had served in the Coast Guard, and my partner, Tim, also served in the Coast Guard. He's a retired Coast Guard surfman. So it's something we set up that we're very passionate about. So we've got a few irons in the pot. That's kind of where I'm at now, and we'll see how it plays out.
So obviously a lot's happened since we last talked, which is cool. Like I said, I was excited for you, going for your doctorate degree. I can't imagine the amount of work that went into it. I know you kind of gave me a little glimpse of the stuff you were working on, constantly writing. And you had talked about the consulting thing, and I think that's important also that, once you have this knowledge, definitely you use it. But the risk assessment portion that you're talking about, to me, is kind of interesting. In the fire service and the police department and the military, we know there's an inherent risk of everything that we do, and we wholeheartedly accept the risk, but not to the point that we put ourselves in unnecessary danger. There's always as management or as leadership in the organization, or as a chief officer, or even as a captain or lieutenant, you have to be able to take a look at the situation and then make that decision of the go, no, don't go, or what can we do to lessen the risk so we can go in and do our job. Is that the kind of stuff that you're looking at now? As far as the business world, obviously I don't know what type of risk assessment they're looking at. Obviously, it's not life and limb like it would be for public service, but what kind of stuff are you looking at risk assessment-wise in the business world? And you said that they wholeheartedly accept that. What is it that they're accepting, and what are you looking at?
So operational risk management is very interesting, right? In a global economy, businesses have to change on a dime. What plan A was a minute ago may already be scrapped, right? So the first place they start is where their risks, their financial risks. They look at people risks. They look at other threats, other organizations, and what the risk is losing market shares to another company. So basically the business world, it's really neat, right? And this is something Tim and I are looking into to bridge the gap, because risk management can be in everything we do. When we look at other industries, like the logging industry, when we look at the building industry, right? When we go out and we find these acquired structures, you're always going to find that risk management person there, as far as, if they're on a working site or something like that. But then there's the other levels of risk management that threaten a company's financial security. And for companies, right, people are in business. Capitalism exists because it's about making money, and the more money they make, the more people they can hire and grow their business. So that's really a lot of the risk, without getting too deep into it, that companies are looking for. And that's important, right? Because the bottom line, if a business doesn't make money, it doesn't exist. So they take it very serious. Where to the other side, when we talk about what the fire service does, for example, That we know there's certain inherent risks and we accept them, but unfortunately, I think we accept them too freely. A very different when we talk about the military and we look at the Coast Guard specifically, and their 20 to 25 year struggle to put risk management in place and risk management as a system in place. We look at things like the Coast Guard will risk a boat to save a life. The Coast Guard will not risk a life to save a life. Then you look at the fire service. We'll risk a lot to save a lot. And we all know as firefighters, that's the ultimate thing. It's like, if we perish saving this person, this is our job. So again, we get back to that culture thing and our willingness to accept risk. And it's very much a perception, even down to the point of each person. We know a younger, more inexperienced person, maybe they're willing to accept more risk because they don't know any better, or vice versa. They're not willing to accept as much risk because they don't have the knowledge and experience. And so those are the things you look at being able to lay out and look at how that foundation happens, like how we set up that foundation to be able to truly assess risk. Because we say in the fire service and a lot of other organizations, situational awareness. Well, that's great as a buzzword. We say situational awareness, but yet, unfortunately, we're still getting hurt on calls and we're having line of duty deaths. So what does situational awareness mean? So we need to get more away from buzzwords and make situational awareness a word of action. So how do we do that? Well, we have to talk about it. Risk management, risk analysis is very much a conversation. And it starts with understanding the difference between a hazard and risk. And if you cannot identify a hazard, how can you ever mitigate it? So Tim and I very much look into that deliberate risk management, and through deliberate risk management of some of the things we do on a daily basis, we can build that platform of being able to identify and assess risks, not as a one person as an officer, but as a team. And so that's kind of in a nutshell how we look at it a little different. And Tim and I know a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, and it's interesting when you talk risk management, we're doing it all the time. We're the fire service, risk management every day. Then you start to have a conversation and you're like, well, the words exist, but how are you managing risk? And if you're managing risk, why do these things happen? And then that's the next level where you get into the whole HFACs that the military, DOD, Coast Guard has been researching for years. They actually have like in the Coast Guard safety office, they have a gentleman who's a PhD that is on the back of the HFACs guide, the human factor analysis guide, that they've been studying it for years. And we know where the errors exist in the human factor. If we can start getting that word out, and again, this is kind of selfish, but it goes back to my dissertation of effective leadership. How do we get there? It's a building block approach. We have to build that foundation. We should be talking about basic risk management principles at the beginning in the academy, so we're all on the same page with the same lingo. And then we build that out as we grow within our career, as we grow from firefighter 3, for us, to master firefighter, to lieutenant, to captain, to chief. We just start adding in higher level thinking on that kind of stuff. So sounds like a lot. There's a lot to it, right? I can talk risk management for days, but that's kind of the approach that we're taking. And risk management is for everybody, right? So there's no one, all these organizations are doing it. So we're looking at how we can do a better job in the high risk world of firefighting, police, logging. There's just so many other high risk jobs out there that for the most part, we can stop, at least in the beginning. We know a lot of things that can kill us, right? For us, basement fires, we know what the problems are with that. It's almost like you can pre-plan with deliberate risk management of working backwards what could go wrong. So you're already thinking about that in your decision-making process. And in the end, understanding what a hazard and a risk is, how to identify it, how to mitigate it is also the key to making better decisions. in the end, whether it's on the fire ground or we're running a large event like the county fair.
I think what I want to do, I want to expand on some of the stuff that you said. We talked about human factors in the fire service. We're going to talk about that. I had the pleasure of speaking to and having a good conversation with Jason Bresler. He's out in New York City. He's a firefighter up in New York. Actually, I think he's a captain now. But he does the Leadership Under Fire podcast, and he does a lot of that human factors that are based in the decision making. And I want to talk a little bit about the human factors because this came into play when we were doing the investigation for the Ball Road fire in Frederick, where Josh Laird fell through into the basement and ultimately was a line of duty death. It was the first time that I know of that we actually brought in human behavioralists and talked about the human factor and decision making into this after action report. And it brought up a lot of good stuff. So let's focusing in on the human factors and the decision making and why we do sometimes the things that we do in the fire service. Sometimes it's good stuff, it's calculated, and we make good decisions. But a lot of times it's like almost like fly by the seat of your pants, off the cuff. Not a lot of thought went into, and we put ourselves in unnecessary harm's way. Again, we talked about there's an inherent risk to our job, and we wholeheartedly and freely accept that risk. But the situational awareness, which is the buzzword we throw around in the fire service, but there is meaning and things that back that up. So let's talk a little bit about these human factors before we move on, because I think for the people that are listening, especially ones that are contemplating, becoming a line officer, eventually maybe becoming a command officer, what are some of the things that we should teach and instill in the new recruits that are coming in when we talk about human factors and we talk about things that we learn from NIOSH reports and line of duty death reports that we should be kind of, baking into the cake of our recruit classes and things that we should be telling them and that they should pull out of that. Is that something that we can talk about and what you see and what you think a message should be given to the new firefighters that are coming in?
Yes. So I think the first place to start is we are human, and to be human is the air, right? But the biggest thing that we need to understand is failure is going to happen. We are going to make mistakes. The biggest thing we can do is learn from those mistakes. And that's where we hit pitfalls sometimes, right? We think if we call out the mistakes and say, here they are, we're being totally open and transparent about that, that sometimes that's it. The biggest thing, and you and I have talked about this, and to me it goes back to everything, is the why, right? Why do we do what we do? So if we're looking at starting at a recruit level and we're talking about, risk a lot to save a lot. Great term. We buy into it wholeheartedly, but what does that mean? And when is that appropriate? Right? So risk a lot to save a lot. I mean, everyone's perception is a little different, so people can perceive that different. So I think it starts there with explaining what it is we do as a culture, why we do it, and for that level, it's really hard to figure out, especially, there's a lot of people, and I can tell with some of my instructors that I'm using for acquired structure training, from that very first day you're in the academy to when you get out, you go through your rookie time, you spend some time in, you're a seasoned fire 3 now or a master firefighter. When you start to have these conversations of what happens in some of these line of duty deaths, it's really a different perception, because until you get into that front seat and start to be responsible for each other or for other people, you don't realize what a tall order that now becomes. Risk a lot to save a lot. Risk a lot to save a lot. Do I risk my entire crew to save someone that might potentially be alive, right? That starts to me become way different, right? So without getting too in the weeds with that, starting in the beginning, I think you just need to have that conversation of what that means and a basic understanding of risk analysis is. Risk a lot to save a lot, but before we do that, we got to stop and think, what are the hazards here? Let me look at the hazards. What is the risk associated with the hazard? If I know I'm going to go in there and die because it's a basement fire, but someone might be alive in a back bedroom, the high likelihood when I do my green, amber, red assessment, which is a Coast Guard thing that I can explain a little bit, is I'm in the red with that. The floor could give away. There's fire under me. Say I'm a truck company. I'm going to go in real quick, do a search. What are you searching? And you're taking your crew in there over, a fire with no hand line. You're in the red with that. Well, like risk a lot to save a lot. That's just unnecessary risk. So I think, upfront early, you need to talk about, what's a risk, what's a hazard, and just get a basic understanding of risk management principles. And then that's something that we need to build on. And I talk about this all the time, and that culture. What is the culture of our fire service? What do we want it to be? Do we want to be risk everything to maybe save someone? Because I feel like sometimes that's more the decisions we're making. And again, I go back to a culture of the Coast Guard will risk an asset. They'll risk a boat to save a life. They will not risk a life to save a life. There's too much unknown with it. So, it gets a little sticky with that, because I know a lot of people will listen to this and go, it's our job. Well, it's not our job to die. And especially as officers, it's not our job to die. It's our job to go in, mitigate an incident based on really good, solid decisions, based on fire behavior that we know so much more about, and based on our crew first and their safety, and hope that we can make the save in the most safe way matter. And then at that point, if we don't make it back, it becomes a more justified risk, but at least it was thought through. So education, is big to me. And I think if we start early, a lot of these concepts we think are too much for the rookie or too much for the recruit. But we can take any subject and break it down to its very foundation and start talking about it, and then giving it to them in pieces. So as they're coming up in their career, it makes more sense. I know, so that's just my thought on it.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said. And people that are listening to this, they need to understand, from a firefighter's perspective, from an officer's perspective, if you are going in with the intent to rescue or do search and rescue, or even if there's known occupancy trapped, our job is to make the situation, or to reduce the risk as much as possible so we can go in and effectively do our job. So if you have, we'll use the basement fire analogy. If you have a fire in the basement, what we used to do is we'd go in through the front door, we'd scramble around with a hose line, we'd try to find the basement stairs, and then we try to go down the basement stairs in order to put the fire out so we could make rescues. But as we have moved forward in the job, as we move forward, as we gain more knowledge, we've realized that, hey, if I do a circle check and I have a basement entrance at that level, it's a lot easier to attack the fire on the level that it's at, get the fire extinguished, while the crews that are above can start to make rescues or start an operation up there. The days of going in on a floor, an uncontrolled fire below us, without the benefit of water being on that fire, is getting to the point now where it's almost taboo, because we need to get water on the fire first. And I know when we changed our structural firefighting policy when I was in Montgomery, The whole premise was fast water. And what that meant in a nutshell was get water on the fire as fast as possible at the quickest route possible. So if that meant that you had a good amount of fire in the basement and there was no basement entrance, but it had windows, break the windows out and start flooding the basement to get that fire knocked back to allow the crews to get in and sustain a longer firefight. That's becoming the normal now. Same thing if you have a basement entrance. It's key that our officers are getting and taking a look in the basement. We get a report of a fire on the second floor, and you get into the house, you got to check the lowest level because if there's smoke, decent amount of smoke conditions on the lowest level, chances are it's down there. So we need to make sure that we are attacking the fire at the level that it's on. So I hope people start to understand that. That doesn't mean that we're not aggressive with our tactics. It means that we're being smarter with our tactics and we're being able to get these fires under control a lot quicker. And that allows the survivability rate for trapped occupants a little more time, and it allows us to go into the structure a little deeper, a little faster in order to effect rescues. And people need to understand that we're not saying, oh well, there's a lot of fire in that basement, so I'm not going in that house until we get until we do something about that. No,
right.
It's a two-pronged approach. We're going to go in and make rescues at the same time we're putting water on the fire as fast as possible. Sometimes that might mean that if you've had an exterior fire that's burning into the structure, that first line might have to go to the exterior fire and put it out, and that second due company might have to go interior and mop up. So we need to start putting that whole, I'm first in and I'm going to be inside first. No, we got to go where the fire is. We've got to put the fire out. We've got to mitigate the situation in order to do the rest of what our job is, which is life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation from a command standpoint, or RECOVS from a tactical standpoint. So people need to understand that we're not saying we're not going in if there's a lot of fire in that house. No, we're going to go in with, if I need 2 lines, then that's what I'm going to have. We just had a fire a few days ago in my hometown. We rolled up on the scene. I was the first one there. I was in my personal vehicle. I had my gear, but I had no SCBA. We had a report of 4 people trapped in the house. Luckily, everybody got out right as we were pulling up. But that was a 2-line fire. The first line had to go into the garage where the fire was in order to keep it out of the house. So it was a 2-line fire. So we immediately deployed 2 lines and we kept the fire in the garage and everybody got out. So people need to understand we can still be aggressive with our tactics, but now as we move in the fire service, as we're coming into the 21st century, we have to be smarter about what we do. That means we got to understand the risk. We got to understand building construction. We have to understand the capabilities of our people and our apparatus, and all that kind of falls into risk assessment when we are, working in the fire service. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely 100% agree with that. And that is a perfect example of me droning on about this risk analysis, risk management, understanding, identifying hazard and risk and what that means. And you summed it up in what we do, and you also gave the why behind it. And the beautiful thing about especially deliberate risk management, when we talk about this ahead of time and we create a culture of safety. People tend to think that safety means that we can no longer do our job. It's just the opposite. We can do our job better because we're making informed decisions about the hazard, and so that's the whole thing of the whole HVACs where it breaks down, right? And the whole thing about HVACs is that whole Swiss cheese model, right? Like it's looking at organizational influences, unsafe supervision, preconditions, unsafe acts. We know by mistakes we've made in the past, and this is what I'm talking about, is learning from those mistakes and even sharing after actions, even at the academy level with our recruits. We can talk about the organizational influences of why an error happened. We can talk about, was it a leadership thing? So leadership and teamwork and crew resource management and situational awareness are all part of this, right? And you talk about that early and don't make them buzzwords. You educate them. Here's the word. Here's what it means. Here's why. And everything that we've done and learned, not only as each organization of a fire service or a police department or military entity, we look at maybe the specifics, but then there is a slew of information out there that other people have made these mistakes. And we can look at what were the organizational influences. And if it's a very toxic culture or a old way of thinking of, when we didn't even go into buildings with SCBAs, right now we know we will die of cancer. There's a high chance we'll die of cancer. If we look at those things and we take it and we share it back, and this is the why we do what we do. This is why we don't do it, right? And unsafe supervision, we got to talk about it. It goes back to that officer role. I am not trying to be cool because there's a lot of fire and someone might be in there and maybe we'll make a save. So I'm going to take my crew into an unsafe act and we all die, or worse yet, I'm the only one that lives and I have to explain to their family and everyone else why I made that decision. Preconditions, the preconditions, I always go back to our culture. Change is hard for everybody. And, I think, some organizations, some services, it's even harder. We know what we know about the fire service. I love the fire service. I'm not here to criticize it. It's been my whole life. It's all I've ever wanted to do, but we know what our culture is like. And I see that slowly starting to change in a positive direction based on some of the things you were talking about. And I'm on the Council of Governments training group for this Maryland, DC, Virginia area. And I'm seeing that change. I'm seeing the people get in the right place that are talking about, we can do this and we can do a phenomenal job at this and do it better without hurting people. That's always going to be, we're always going to have those risks of it happening. People will die in our job, but we can lessen that through education and building these strong foundations of learning from our mistakes. And I think one of the best ways to learn are like case studies, especially as we move up in our career, as we move up from linemen to officers to chief officers, looking back at that and just the power of being able to discuss the stuff and be open about it. And then saying, okay, what's the plan to move forward? A lot of times I see we can talk about a plan and the plan never takes fruition. And I go by the 80% rule. Man, this is a good plan. Let's start it. We're 80% there. Let's implement it. Let's see where we can improve it. Let's talk to other people and let's get something in place where we can start making better decision makers. So.
Yep, agree 100%. I think that as chief officers, when we are running an incident, we say this 1,000 times when I do these shows and do fire engineering stuff, but we always talk about how we are making decisions based off of imperfect information. The picture's not fully established yet, but as the fireground progresses, we start getting better picture. That way we can start calling for more people, maybe putting them in different spots, things like that. It's the same, people need to understand that when you're a new line officer, don't become a line officer and then ride that apparatus and think I'm going to do the cool stuff so people like me. It's not about being liked. It's about doing your best to do the right thing. And sometimes that means, hey, we're not going in there because we don't have the tools and the resources to make that action happen right now. Is there things we can do in the meantime while we're waiting for those assets to get there to give us what we need? Absolutely. And that's where your situational awareness comes into play. That's where your good 360, all that stuff. And that allows us to progress on the fire ground. Some of the things that people need to understand, there's things out there that I tell every firefighter to do. Read your NIOSH reports. Read after action reports. You can look at them online and read what happened. How did that injury happen? How did that line of duty death happen? And look at it. And there's always 5 key things that are always in there. It's command, communication, lack of following policy, and there's a few others. And look at that and then say, hey, is that how I operate? Is that how our organization operates? And if there's a way to start to affect change, then you work on affecting change. I've told people that, the change starts at the line officer. If the line officer says this is this is how I adopt my philosophy when I go into a fire. I'm going to make sure that my guys are going to go home. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that they go home. We accept that risk, but we're going to make sure that we've got what we need in order to put this fire out. When I arrived on the scene of that house fire the other night, and I asked, was there anybody still inside? They said, yes, there's still one person inside, but I believe he's right there at the door. And I said to myself, I can crawl into that front door and make a grab if I have to. And then somebody said, no, he's up on the second floor. And I said right there to myself, I can't make it to the second floor because I don't have an SCBA. I don't have a hose line. And the house was on fire. So I wasn't going to go in there to try to make this grab without the equipment in order to try to make a rescue, because I would not have made it. Luckily, the person walked out of the house, took a little bit of smoke. But those are the things that, as a line officer, and I'm talking to these new line officers right now, don't do things because you think that's what your crew wants to do. Educate yourself, learn the risk management, learn how to gain that good situational awareness in order to make decent decisions so you can ensure that your crew can do the job and that everybody goes home. That's the key. And people can look at me and say, well, I would have gone up to the top floor. And I say, well, you're a fool. That's exactly what I would tell them, because you don't have the equipment. And if you pass out and die, you've done nothing. You've done nothing for the person that's up there that needs to be rescued. And the fire department, I could hear the sirens. They were literally less than a minute behind me. So, but that's the takeaway that these newer officers need to understand. That you're not there to impress your people that are riding the fire engine with you. You're there to do a job and make sure that your people are safe. People need to understand that once you put on those collar pins and you become a lieutenant or a captain, you're responsible for not just yourself, but for your crew. And not only are you responsible for the crew, you're making a silent promise to their family members that you're going to lead them and be as safe as you can be, and try to keep them out of harm's way while they do their job. That's my soapbox, and I'll get off of it now.
No, it all ties back to that, right? And it's risk management as a system. And talking about the NIOSH reports and after actions, that's risk management as a system where I think it's harder for organizations. I can talk about especially the fire service, because it's like we need check boxes, right? We need check boxes to build the skill set and to build the foundation. But then we need people to be decision makers. So how do we get past the check boxes to the decision-making point? And, part of that answer is through education, explaining why, putting people through a lot of exercises, to look at these NIOSH reports and look at what they're telling us, and to look at them as, why did it happen? And not in an accusatory manner, but from an HVAC standpoint. Was it organizational? An organizational influence? Was it something in the policy? Was it a supervisory factor? Was it, I wanted to be cool and took my crew into something, or I didn't want anyone to think I was a wimp? Was it a supervisory violation or a lack of knowledge? And a lot of it is preconditions too, like personal factors, communications, coordination, training. And you start to look at those things and work backwards of, what went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Mentality. And so you educate yourself truly about why it happened. And then you ask yourself, how can it not happen again? What would I do? That's the benefit of case study and looking at these NIOSH reports. We're not writing them, just to write them. We're supposed to be learning from them. And I think that's one place to start where we could do better. And that's really looking at risk management as a system, as honest reporting. Doesn't need to be finger pointing. There's, like the Coast Guard does different classifications of mishaps, but they report everything, and not to point a finger at anybody. And every case, every class of mishap doesn't go to this whole other investigation level, but they report almost everything, and they just report it in a very, straightforward manner, because they have a reporting system, and then people can look at it and see. And then when you look at those and you have that HVAC mentality of, what went wrong, and break it down, you start to learn from it. And, that's kind of risk management as a system. It has to be the reporting system, the education system. This is risk management. This is risk analysis. This is what hazard means. This is what risk means. Deliberate risk management. When we talk about deliberate risk management, we all do deliberate risk management every day in the fire service. Our morning lineup, the battalion chief sending out what our day is. The weather is this. Consider this. And then we have our morning lineup. We're doing deliberate risk management. We're having those conversations. But I can see it morphing like the history of the Coast Guard. When I was in the Coast Guard, we were doing all those things. But there hadn't been something formally in place. They were putting it in place right as I was exiting. And then it took a whole 25 years to really morph into what it was. And it took a lot of bad instances, right? Like, killing, literally being charged for killing people because of, bad decisions, not considering the risk. And it was a lot of I'll quit it with them as well. And that's the history of any organization, right? But you can't fix something if you can't identify or you don't admit that it's broken. So I think we're getting better as a fire service, but I just think the more we can define things and take a little less of the checkbox away and make it purposeful and make it part of our culture, that's when we start to win. That's when we really start to make those changes that honestly we really need, in my opinion.
And I feel it's important that officers understand, and chief officers as well, they need to lead the way for this. When you run those calls, even if it's a small fire or an accident or something like that, where people were working, and when the incident's over, is to have that hot wash or the tailboard talk, to sit back and just talk about what went right. What are some things that we need to improve? I think it's important to have those talks after incidents that not just a run of the mill, but something that there was a little more than just one or two moving parts. But to have those hot washes, and I think it's important for I know it's important for the command officer to be humble and point out some of the mistakes that he made and why he or she thought that they were mistakes and how they're going to correct them in the future. And then go around to talking to the officers and ask them, what did you see? What did you think? And ensure that you hit the firefighters that were riding the line. Let them understand that you have a voice in the fire service, and to hear that we want to hear what you have to say and what you saw versus what we saw. And I think that will strengthen how we move forward in the fire service, how we shape our policies and things like that. But it also allows us to kind of analyze that call at that time of something that was a little significant that happened. You can put that away in your Rolodex or whatever you're calling it in the 21st century. So when that incident or a similar incident happens, you can easily call back and say, what did I do the last time to mitigate that? What did I do the last time it didn't work, but this is ultimately how it worked? That way you're improving your critical thinking skills, you're improving your decision-making skills, and you're able to make decisions quicker and put your actions in play faster. So I think it's pretty imperative to do those hot washes, even if it's a gas leak and there was no command officer there, two engines and a truck. Have the officers get together and say, hey, what did you see? How can we improve? To be able to ask for that information, to have to put the ego in check, to ask somebody, hey, where can I improve? To me, says a lot about your character, that you're willing to not only hear what I have to say, but take in the information that you give me, and then I can use it later.
Absolutely. And another reason why that's so important, and to engage everybody, a lot of times I know I've been on hot washes where it's like, hey, officers, just come here. Well, there's a lot coming from the firefighters. And even if we can't gain something from them because it, for whatever reason, maybe we have that experience and they're inexperienced, it helps them to be able to bring it up and us to understand where they're coming from or where they're, how we can better bring them forward as their officer, right? And the big thing is with all of this stuff, with anything, and risk is the same. The way I might assess a risk and look at a risk may be different than how you are looking at a risk, and you may want to accept more risk than me, right? So it becomes a perception thing. And I know one of the things that Tim did in when we did our risk management workshop, and I thought it was brilliant, and he just took a Coke can and sat it there and said, you all might see this a little differently. Like if I ask you to explain this, you might explain it a little differently. It's the same Coke can, but our perception is different. That's why communication is key. That's why these hot washes are key. That's why talking to and deciding who we are as a culture and how we want to go and what our objectives are, and communicating those early and often are so important, because perception can really, it's how subcultures are born, and subcultures can be very dangerous, right? So yes, it's important on so many levels. So I totally agree.
I think I wish, and maybe it is happening, and maybe this is where your consulting business can kind of take off, is take what we learned in the fire service and take that into the business world, of have the bosses or the managers come out on the floor and hot wash the week, maybe on a Thursday or something like that. It's like, hey, what all happened today? What are some stumbling blocks that we had? What's the good? What's the bad? How can I improve? Is there anything that I did? To be honest and transparent with your leadership in the business world, in the white collar world, and allow that information to come back to you, I think would end up taking away a lot of the resentment and the gossip, the water cooler talk and all that about the boss. They're not doing this, or this company's being driven into the ground, to where they can get that feedback from people of this is what I saw, or hey, this happened. Why did you do this? And allow that boss to give that explanation. I think would make for the company to work a little smoother. Now, it can definitely swing the wrong way, where you always have that one person, that Karen or that Chad, that wants to complain about everything. But I think as far as in the fire service, I welcome the firefighters to ask the questions like, hey, chief, we were getting ready to take that line in the front door and you told us to hold off and you let somebody else do something. Why did you do that? And I'm more than happy to explain my rationale. If my answer is, I don't know, well, then that's a failure on my part. But to ask those questions of how come you did that, then they might look at it and go, oh, I never even saw that. I didn't think about that. And that's going to be stuck in their head. So as they move forward in their careers, they're going to see that, hey, this happened, 6-7 years ago, and the chief did this, and here's why. I think in the business world, and I don't know if I got very many business people that listen to this particular podcast, but don't poo-poo on your workers, because they are the ones that are closest to the problems. And if one of the problems is management, then by all means, management needs to hear that, because a lot of times it comes down to just piss poor communication. Their vision isn't being put out there, or it's not being put out there correctly, or they have no idea why you're doing what you're doing. And hey, have you noticed we have this high turnover rate? People are leaving. We're people down. What are we doing about this? Why are people leaving? It's a broad thing, but I think that maybe that the business world can take some cues from the fire service. You're not dealing with life and death situations, but you could be dealing with millions and millions of dollars worth of investments or business that you could lose. Does that sound right? Because I'm not a white collar worker by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it sounds exactly right. And this is why I say everything's intertwined, right? And it goes back to our talk, a couple years ago about content of leadership versus context, right? The content is very much the same. We look at it contextually different based on the organization. This is the same thing. It's like risk management is a huge thing in the business and finance world. They have to protect their assets, because a business that doesn't make money fails, right? Their job is to make money. So risk management is very important in that aspect. And part of being a successful organization is being able to keep good people that buy into your vision and your mission and your goals and objectives. If you can't achieve your goals and objectives, guess what? You fail as an organization. So there's a lot that we can take from each other. This is all intertwined. It's just the cultures that we look at and how we can implement it. A hot wash is second nature to us in the fire service. And we do them all the time. I always, as a line officer, it didn't matter the most simple call. It's like, hey, did you see the hydrants there? Where would you pull the line if this was going on? What would you do here, right? And a business should engage in the same way, because it's about collaboration, it's about communication, it's about your number one asset in any organization, and it's your people. If you don't have the people, and you don't have the people that are capable of getting the job done, you fail. Fire service, business, it doesn't matter. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, how awesome would it be? Pick whatever line of work you're in, whether it's police, fire, military, Wall Street, whatever. To enjoy not only your job, but truly enjoy working for your boss, and it makes it feel like you're working with your boss as opposed to working for your boss. How awesome would that be to come to work and have that feeling every day of, not only do I enjoy my work that I do, but I know my boss has my back, and that if there's any trouble brewing, they get a whiff of it right away, and they suss it out. We're going to sit down. We're going to talk. What's going on? This is what I'm seeing. Talk to me, guys. What am I missing? How can we make this better? If you have management that's constantly trying to improve the fire service by putting your ego in check, being humble with showing your humility, asking questions, getting that feedback, truly listening more than talking. How great would the fire service, or pick whatever business you're in, be? The turnover rate would be minimal. You would have people that would work it. You would have people that might not be making as much money as they could be for another firm, but truly love the management that they work for, knowing that their job's secure, business is good, and they truly listen and care about me. I think that if we could get to a place like that in all walks of working environment, I think that we would be a lot better off. We'd see this less turnover. But as it stands now, we just see this high turnover. And when I see that, I immediately go to, it's management's fault. I place most of the blame on management. You do have certain people that job hop, but for the most part, if you've got collar pins that signify as you're an officer or a chief, management, and things aren't working right, or there's high turnover rate, or morale is down, then squarely rests on the shoulder of management. Just my opinion.
Well, there's actually a book about that, and it's that's what level 5 leadership is, and a level 5 leader is. Level 5 leader looks out the window, and when everything's going right, they give the credit to the people out there doing it. But when something goes wrong, they look in the mirror and they take it squarely on their shoulders, and they say, this is my responsibility. What did I do wrong? How can I fix this? What do I need to give my people to succeed? So that's a level 5 leader. And so that's exactly it. And the goal should be to create that win-win mentality. Everybody wins. Do the best for the many, not the few, not for yourself especially, right? The last thing you should be doing in any, in management and leadership, we've talked about this. They're different, but they're complementary. And, the management gives you the goals and objectives, the outline, and the leader gets to the heart of the people and makes sure they get stuff done and takes the responsibility when stuff goes wrong. And that's the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate goal in my mind. If I could go out and help an organization reorganize or do better, is to get to that win-win mentality. Your people matter. When you don't look at your people as the number one asset, you're not going to ever be as good as you could. You may get by, but you're never going to be as great as you could be.
Yep, and one of the things that I tried to instill in people when we talk about leadership and things is I tell people, I said, do whatever it is that you can do to show your people that you care about them and be authentic about it. It literally costs you nothing. But if you don't truly care about your people, it'll cost you everything. And I'm not trying to be a cliche, but that's the truth. You'll lose people. If your workers feel you don't care about them and that you are just in the pocket of the shareholders, or all you're trying to do is just make money off the backs of the employees, no matter what happens, if you're dishonest, you're going to lose the people. But if you're truly honest with people up front, you should be able to deliver bad news, and they understand that you went to bat and did everything you can before it got to where it is. But if you don't, it'll cost you everything: your reputation, your respect, and your people. So, believe it or not, we're at the end of this podcast now, and obviously it didn't go where we thought it was going to go. But I truly find this stuff fascinating. And if anything, these young officers out there understand that it's okay to do everything you can to make our job as safe as you possibly can. It's never going to be safe. We are always going to go into burning buildings. We are always going to go into harm's way. But being smart about what you do, being able to look at a situation and say, what can I do to reduce the risk in order for us to go do our job aggressively, quickly, and safely, as safe as possible. That's what it's all about. And I truly find this stuff not only fascinating, but I think it helps to build the decision-making process and the critical thinking skills of newer lieutenants or newer or seasoned firefighters that want to move into that officer's position, or seasoned officers that want to move into that chief officer's positions. I think this stuff is important to know and understand, that it's not all about being reckless and hey, if I die, I die. That's not the direction that we go in the fire service. It's I want to go in and I want to do my job in order to mitigate an emergency situation, save lives, save property, make sure that my brothers and sisters go home. That's the way I view it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I keep agreeing with you, and I'm not agreeing with you just to agree with you. I 100% believe the same. And, that for me, my passion's always been the fire service, and my goal is to leave something better than I found it. And so I don't think this is the way I thought it was going to go today either, but I threw out what's going on, and we found a rabbit hole and went down it again. And I think it's a very good message. I hope it's well received, and there's so much to it. But I appreciate you having me on and giving me a chance to talk about it and sharing your wisdom with me.
So, before we go, you said that, you're doing a nonprofit. Give a plug of what your nonprofit is. If people want to know more about it, where can they go and find out more about it? You're writing a book. If you want to throw the title out there, if it's still work in progress, that's fine too. But, this is the part of the show where, go ahead and plug yourself of what you're doing and how people can get involved.
Well, right now, where we're at with Survival to Thrival, we're getting everything set up. We're probably just a couple weeks out before we have the website and everything up. So I may have to just get back to you on that. And then as far as the book, we're starting to write the chapters now. It's going to be very much geared towards risk management and how leadership and teamwork apply to that whole concept. So again, maybe I'll just have to come back on to talk about it. Because
Absolutely. Yeah, once you get the website up and running and there's more information, shoot it to me. It'll go up on the social media. It'll be tagged to this show. Even if it's a month or two down the road, it'll still be tagged with what it's all about, a little write-up, and people can go and take a look at it and go from there. But Shelly, I truly appreciate you being on the show again. It's always great to hear your perspective of where a doctor in leadership, organizational leadership, their thought process and the things that they learned, and then still having that foot in operations as well as training. That's important. I like hearing your perspective and what you see and the things that you've done. So I appreciate you being on the show, and look forward to seeing the book that you write. Looking forward to seeing the nonprofit website when it comes out and what it's all about, and definitely looking forward to seeing how your consulting business works out for you.
Thanks so much, Dave. I really appreciate it, and we'll talk soon.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.